Hey everyone, this video is all about painting a cool image inspired by the Dune movie. We'll break down the process from start to finish. My name is Victor, I'm a concept artist, so let's start. The second Dune film was released a while ago and is just packed with amazing shots. It's very cinematic, just like the first one, and for this video I figured I wanted to paint a scene with the ornithopter in it. Maybe like a bunch of them are taking off. The ornithopter is not the easiest subject, I would say, so let's see if I'll manage to paint something nice. First thing for me is establishing the horizon line and getting an understanding of where the camera is. Now, drawing our subject is probably the most challenging task right now, and you don't have to draw like a carbon copy of it from the movie. That's not the purpose of this painting or this exercise in general. You just want to make a cool, moody sketch and, be inspired by the movie visuals. So as I'm composing the image, I will place a few characters in the foreground and maybe a few others scattered around for the scene. Let's see how this might work. And we'll probably go for a sunny type of environment with lots of dust and direct sunlight. In this case, maybe we'll place the sun off screen somewhere in the back. I usually start from the background and put down some flat color. This stage is pretty straightforward. Basically take all your elements from your composition, blocking all the shapes with flat color. As a reference, you can use maybe some stills from the movie or photos with similar weather and lighting conditions. For example, I'm going for a bit of a silhouetted look since the sun will be in the background somewhere. After all this is done, you can play in your composition with some contrast of light and shadow. For example, I figured it might work to have the foreground a bit darker in the shadow. Let's also adjust the value of those buildings in the back, make them a little bit darker. And let's take our focal point a little bit, which is the big ornithopter from Dune. First, when describing the form, you want to group and simplify the values as much as possible. Make sure that everything is readable and you can distinguish the shapes you create with the values you selected. And for now, let's indicate where the shadows are on all of our main objects in the scene. The design of this object is quite complex, so I'm resorting to a great deal of simplification when it comes to showing all those details. So indicating the details as much as possible as opposed to sort of describing all those shapes and forms accurately. And for now, what we're looking at is essentially the body of like an attack helicopter, like Apache or something like that, with the narrow form factor and all that, and then the rotors are placed on the side and kind of have the function of the wings of a dragonfly. So for you not to be intimidated by a complex construction in the beginning, it is important to break down the subject into simple shapes. And then a lot of answers will surface naturally to you. You should start by thinking in terms of cubes, cylinders, and spheres first, and then figure out the more intricate stuff, how things connect and all the details. Now it's time for the rotors, and here you have to check the reference images to make sure that you understand how they're placed. After roughly putting them down, you can use a blur filter to give them like the fast moving feeling, or you can just pick a smudge brush with scattering on and add the blur manually. And also notice that I'm putting down very rough brush strokes because I know I'll smudge them later on. By the way, you guys can get some of my most used brushes I have for free. Just hit the link in the description and feel free to grab them. Alright, moving on to more form description of the vehicle and already some material information. Now in the movie there wasn't a lot of contrast happening on the surface and the planes of the ornithopter, but since this is a painting you can definitely be a bit more expressive. I'll try to add some sort of pattern, see how that works. And of course you can define those forms a bit more, especially the rounded forms of the base of the rotors where they're attached to the body. Really, there's no specific order you need to adhere to. Just decide organically how do you want to feel in this shape with details, form, and just don't get stuck too long in one spot. Since this is a sandy environment, we can definitely add some dirt and grit to the cabin exterior glass. Also, since we're at it, let's crop and copy the rotors from our main ornithopter to the others in the background. It's the same process, quite simple, just don't forget to adjust the position a little bit. The building in the background right now is just a flat shape, so you can already start thinking how to give it some form. In this case, I figured it's just a big angled surface with some huge plates and tiles. Since it might be a hangar, you can place some big old entrance gate as well. We can also break the silhouette line on top with some bits here and there just to make things more interesting. Some surfacing details like dirt, corrosion, and things like that. This will help you unify the image a little bit and integrate this in the environment. Alright, it's very important to keep an eye on the values. You can notice I keep adjusting them time to time whenever I see that something is not working, like this building being too bright overall. We have some structures in the back as well, and it's pretty much the same process. If the form is clear, then you can proceed with some material information, maybe some design ideas and patterns from the movie as well could work. Notice that I'm going back and forth between the background and middle ground when I'm trying to complete the painting with additional details. That pattern of dirt on the wall, for example, you can just duplicate it and adjust it to fit higher on the building as well. It will save you a little bit of time. On the right side, the image still looks pretty empty. So with just that small vehicle, probably would be a good idea to place a few things there to give it some balance. I figured some random structures, maybe storage containers or something like that. Try to check the image from time to time from a zoomed out distance just to keep an eye on the whole picture. Make sure the composition works as well as values and everything all together with the focal point. So yeah, zooming out every now and then helps a lot. Now this is a little cool trick I sometimes use in very specific situations. So you have this huge horizontal plane, right? It has only like an indication of a big shadow and it feels quite empty. You'd probably want to add some detail and structure to it. So because it's such a heavy perspective, it would be a little bit tedious to create a nice grid or some pattern design for it, and at the same time some interesting variations. So you can just create a new empty layer, right click it and select turn to smart objects. Afterwards you can just double click it and a new window opens, and now basically you can paint inside this layer. So essentially what it does is you create a container out of a layer where you can have more stuff, and then when you adjust this first layer that you turned into a smart object, it affects all the other layers inside of it. So we're switching to the smart object, we're painting a grid that will serve as the ground for our painting. You can give it some variation and so on, then click save and it updates in your main file. Now the cool thing about this is that you can take that smart object and transform it like to fit your perspective. Yeah, so you can see that I'm sort of like adjusting it to fit the perspective of the painting, and all of a sudden you have the much needed, perspective information, some lines that are directed towards our vanishing points. And what's more convenient is that if you see that the grid horizontally is not enough, you can go back to the smart object, increase the size by duplicating it, and then hit Ctrl Save, and it will automatically update in the correct perspective in your main file. So we did all this in order to avoid painting in the perspective that we're having right now. So yeah, this is basically one simple trick. I use it just in very specific cases like this one, for example. And again, it's just a tool. Actually painting these details along some perspective grid, it's also quite a viable option. A few elements remain that need some work. The characters in the front are just silhouettes for now, so let's describe them a little bit better. They're in the shadow, and that means that the contrast is going to be between the type of materials and the local colors. So I noticed that I was really speedrunning these guys, and I was going really fast to those shapes, which is not necessarily a good thing. I can say with a fair amount of confidence that the slower and more deliberate you are with the brush strokes, the faster you will achieve a good result. So it's always more about thinking and slowing down and visualizing the brush strokes before replacing it. This way you can understand if certain brush strokes or actions in general are actually useful, and you're not just placing it to see if it sticks. But this whole discussion about brush economy and decision making covers a lot of things and probably needs a video, dedicated only to that. Same thing for the rest of the figures in the scene, and now you can also add some dust in there from the ornithopter liftoff. It's like a bit of fun VFX and sort of tying down the image a bit better. Right, I'm also placing a few details on the ground plane, making sure that the colors work, and that's about it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, please consider liking and subscribing. It helps a ton. Thanks so much for sticking till the end, and I hope to see you in the next one, coming soon.